Today I'm not necessarily going to show you how to hypnotize your friends, but you are going to learn how to make procedural hypnosis spirals in Blender, so maybe you could try them on your friends and get them to squawk like a chicken. Let me know if it works. Maybe these spirals are good enough to get people to do unspeakable things. I don't know. Let's finish this intro and get into the actual tutorial so I can stop rambling about nonsense. So basically what I've made is a little blend file with a plane. So this is just a single plane. All this hypnosis spiral stuff is a material. And this material is only a couple nodes, which you're going to understand very, very soon. It's a simple setup. And what it does is it creates a hypnosis spiral. But on top of that, we have a ton of control. So first of all, we can control the type of spiral we have over here. So for example, we can have a solid spiral. And with that, we can control kind of the shading or the fall off. Let me switch back to the original mode. We can also control stuff like the amount of distortion to get kind of stranger looking ones with a bit of inconsistency. And then of course we also have the size and technically a bunch of other stuff that you can control. But the secret to this whole tutorial, by the way, spoiler, the secret to this whole tutorial is the vector rotate node, which only exists in 2.83 and after. So make sure you're using Blender 2.83 or above, or this tutorial will be impossible to follow. So let's make this very simply, and hopefully you'll understand a bit more about nodes in a minute. So new blend file, if I can start a new blend file, boom. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with our modeling, which is the more complicated part, right? We have to delete everything and add in a plane. Very, very strenuous, I know. And we're already halfway done with the tutorial. That's all the modeling we need to do. Congratulations, 50% done. The rest of it is just making a material. I am so funny. Okay, so once you've added in a plane, again, you don't need a light. I mean, you could use a camera, like we didn't need to delete it, but you don't need a light since it's not reliant on BSDF. Once you have your plane, what I want you to do is create a new material. Call it something like, hypnotize or mess with your friends. I feel like hypnosis is very unethical. Like, I know a lot of it's like, bullshit, but the stuff that is real, I don't know, you can mess with somebody's brain a little. Either way, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by adding in a wave texture. And this is going to be the base for our spiral. Believe it or not, these stripes are actually going to be useful. And I'm just going to reduce the amount of stripes to something that has less. I think technically we only want one, but for now let's just have a couple. So if we were to control the texture coordinates of this, and this is what the vector input is, once we have that control, we can start adding in rotation and twist and vector rotate, and that is what's going to manipulate our wave texture. So what you want to do is either manually add in texture coordinates or use the hotkey Control-T. That's the Node Wrangler add-on, by the way. You go to Edit Preferences, Add-ons, Enable Node Wrangler. I'm just going to add these in manually. So add in your texture coordinates. I'm going to use Object. And technically, you could use any of these. I mean, most of these, generated UV object. The reason I like Object is you're going to notice that generated coordinates are centered on the corner. So are UV coordinates, but object coordinates are centered in the middle. And since we want our hypnosis spiral to kind of start from the middle and kind of expand outwards, that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to show you how to add a bit more control after this. So object coordinates are fed through here, and all we want to do is just kind of mess with them a bit. How? With a vector rotate node. So add in the vector rotate node, and essentially what this does is it's kind of like the mapping node, if you're familiar with that. It takes in texture coordinates as a input, and then you do some kind of rotation-based manipulation, and then we're going to send this to wave texture. So right now we could just change the angle, and it will just be like a perfect rotation centered at the middle. If we were to move the center, so let's have it rotate a bit and move the center, it's going to do something slightly different. We're basically changing the pivot point of where it's rotating. So it's still rotating, but it's not about the center, which is why it looks weird. So that's why the center is 0, 0, 0. And the axis being 0, 0, 1 just means it's pivoting about the z-axis. So imagine there's a z-axis going up here. Actually, I'll just show you. This blue line, our rotation is kind of like about that line, right? If we were to do it in a different axis, it'd give us something slightly different. Okay? So this is what the vector rotate node does, but the issue with this is the angle. In other words, how much we're rotating is uniform everywhere. So everywhere is being rotated by 98 degrees, by 82 degrees, etc. What we want is we want rotation in the middle to be 0, and then as it goes outwards, the rotation grows more and more and more, and this is what makes our twisting spiral, right? Well, how do we do this? Well, we need to create some kind of mask or some kind of map that does what? It radiates from the center. So it's going to be 0 in the middle, and then it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, larger and larger and larger, and that's going to dictate how much rotation we have. The theory is simple. We just need to execute. So a very good trick to do this, maybe you saw this coming. We're going to use a vector math node with our texture coordinates, and we're going to set this to length. In other words, we're taking our texture coordinates and evaluating the magnitude, the scale, the strength, the length, how big are the vectors, right? And you can see we're previewing this. It's going to give us black in the middle because the origin, the center, has the vector 0, 0, 0, which if you know a bit of vector math, that has a length of 0. And as we go further and further away, you can imagine these arrows getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They have a larger length radially, or in some sense spherically, because it's a three-dimensional thing. But that's exactly what we want. So if we were to now, same setup as before, but now plug this into the angle, you can kind of see that we're getting ununiform twisting. So in the middle, it's still vertical. Like remember, these stripes are vertical. So just here, like infinitesimally, like towards the origin, this thing is still vertical, but then the rotation changes as we radially go away. And it kind of looks like not spirally at all right now, but you just have to trust me that we need to make our length value, this map that goes from like 0 to like 1-ish, we just need to make it bigger. So instead of going from 0 to 1, we make it go to like 0 to 50, something like that. And to do that, all we need to do is make this, we scale it, we make it stronger. So I'm going to multiply, using a math node, I'm going to multiply this by a larger and larger number. And you can see as we get bigger and bigger and bigger, it kind of looks like a very messed up spiral, but a spiral nonetheless. So let's keep with something like 10. So now the question is, why does this look so bad? And maybe this is what you want, but why does it look so bad? You're going to notice that there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 on either side. If this one's shared, there's 4 like things happening. There's 4 streaks, and that should correspond with the wave texture. If we remove this, having like 4 lines. In other words, we kind of have too many lines that we're rotating. If we reduce the amount of texture data in some sense that we're rotating, it's going to look much cleaner. So I'm going to take this scale and just bring it down. And you see it's almost getting rid of that excess stuff until we're left with the base spiral. You don't want 0 because with 0 you don't really have anything. And you don't want the super small number above 0. But you want just a very, I guess 0.1 might be something, right? So we have 0.1, and now you see a much cleaner spiral. And since this is the amount of rotation, at least we're scaling the rotation, I want you to think about what this would do if we increase it. Think about it. That's right, what it's going to do is it's going to look like we're kind of scaling this, because what we're doing is we're just adding twists, which makes it more and more dense, the spiral, but it gives the illusion, kind of the illusion that we're zooming out. Okay, so now we have this kind of setup, and we can make it bigger and smaller, but how do we make it like rotate itself, right? We kind of have the angle already taken up by this. Well, if multiplication is saying we need more and more and more twists, addition is just offsetting. It's offsetting the twist. So while you might think that adding something, so let's set this to add. While you might think that adding something also adds more twists, you can't think about it that way. We have a map, a length map going from something like 0 to 1, outputting the length of these texture coordinates. The multiplication makes that a larger interval, a bigger range, and the addition just kind of shifts that interval from side to side. Okay, and since this texture is it's seamless, it's procedural, that shifting is always going to have more texture data to use. It's kind of a confusing concept, but long story short, multiplication is scaling, addition is just offset. And you see it keeps the same number of rings here. It doesn't make this hypnosis spiral denser or sparser, but it just kind of animates it. And we could either kind of keyframe this, put a keyframe I here, and then, go a couple frames, set it to, I don't know, something larger keyframe, and then that animates, but then you're going to have some interpolation issues, as you can already see. You can either do that, or you can do something a lot smarter, and we want this hypnosis spiral to go forever and ever and ever if you want to, hypnotize your friends. The way I would recommend doing this is we're going to use drivers, and you can either open up the timeline and say, I want this frame number, right? Saying what frame we're on. We want to take this data and put it into here. So it's always updating, always changing. You could do that by right-click, copy as new driver, right-click, paste driver. So now you can see this is corresponding with the frame number, and it's always going to animate. Of course, it's going to be a bit too fast, but that's one way to do it. The other way to do the exact same thing, like literally the exact same thing, is you just type in hashtag or tag or octothorpe tag frame, and it's going to create a driver doing exactly what we just did. This is just a shortcut. Okay, so frame 1, it's 1, frame 2, it's 2, 3, etc. And since this is going too fast, what we can do is we can take this, and just inside the expression, we don't have to throw in another math node, even though we could divide it by 10, which is saying take the frame number and divide it by 10. So we have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 instead of 1, 2, 3, which is saying make it 10 times slower. And this is still a linear kind of animation because it's just taking the frame number. There's no kind of weird interpolation. So you could either do it like that, or if you want to have nice procedural control over this, what I would recommend is we can throw in another math node, set it to something like divide, and we're just going to use this as our offset number for the addition. We're going to use hash or tag frame for our driver, and then this is the number we're dividing by. So if we make it 10, it's going to be slow. By the way, sorry for my laptop clicking and clanking. This thing's on its dying breath. I feel like it's going to leave us soon, and it's going to be unfortunate. This is our speed, so 10 would be very slow. Something like 2 would be much faster, etc. Okay? So now we have a working hypnosis spiral. By the way, if you make this a negative number, it's going to reverse the direction, which is something interesting. But we have our hypnosis spiral, and you might think, okay, how do I control this thing beyond just saying the speed of it and maybe the scale of it? So again, if we were to scale this up, it still does the addition stuff, it still works. Well, the rest of the control for this is actually baked right into the wave texture, because again, we're starting off with this texture, which right now only has like one kind of interval of wave because we made the scale super small. We're taking this and rotating it. In other words, if we were to distort this and do something weird to it, it's going to affect our spiral. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger so we have like twice as much data. So right now it looks like this. We can add distortion just to create a more interesting spiral that doesn't look as out of control as when we didn't move the scale, although you can move the scale and get really crazy results. But I like this just because it adds a bit of inconsistency. And once you have a bit of distortion, you could add like detail, scale, and it's going to do a bunch of weird stuff. But distortion is one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is we can kind of control the type of wave, and I guess this is best explained like this. So here's our wave texture. We can change kind of the formula, the function that it's using to generate that from sine to saw. So you can see that kind of looks different from saw to triangle. And if we were to view this, so let's keep this on sine, you're going to see it's going to output different things. So here's our classic sine. Here's saw, which has a much harsher fall off, which is why it looks like kind of like segments. And this is kind of the traditional hypnosis spiral. And then triangle I haven't found to be that good. This is kind of like a thin version, but we do have all of these. And on top of that, if we want to really control this, you could either add in a color ramp, or what I recommend that's a bit easier is we're just going to use power instead of a color ramp. And this lets us control kind of the mapping of this a little. It's not perfect, like color ramp gives us more control. But here you can see we're getting almost a black and white kind of situation. You could go the other way and make it kind of a lighter spiral like this. This of course works with any kind of wave. So here's triangle. And you can see we're getting like pretty interesting results. You can make it a ripple. You can make it like a kind of angelic, inverse situation, if you will. But yeah, I feel like the essence of this tutorial was really the vector rotate node and having a non-uniform angle. Again, we controlled it by using the length, which looks like this, and then we did a bit of manipulation so that, you can't really see it because we multiplied it by such a big number, but if we make it small, whatever, forget that. It's too large of a value since we're adding something pretty big to it as well. But we just manipulate this so we get a non-uniform angle. So now we have this vector rotate node, which itself is a hypnosis spiral, since the texture coordinates better be spiraling if we want our wave texture to. And then you just have a bunch of control over what you want. So again, scale is the multiplication, addition is the offset. We have a bunch of distortion type stuff we can control over here. And then power is going to give us our fall off. Maybe we can get different kinds of fall offs if we actually view it. Okay. So there you go. That is the tutorial about hypnosis spirals. Hopefully this is the only one you'll ever need to watch. I don't know if anybody can do it better. I challenge you to. I hope you enjoyed this free tutorial. If you want to support this channel and get stuff in return, the best way to do that is via Patreon. There is a link in the description for that. I appreciate all 400 something patrons that are already there. If you're interested, some stuff you can get is exclusive video tutorials about Blender and sometimes about other stuff. You can get the blend file. So for example, I'm going to put this blend file up there, even though this is a pretty simple one, but you can get that without doing extra work. And sometimes I put up ones that I don't even do tutorials for. Discord access, behind the scenes. It's a cool place over there. But it is a way to directly contribute to this channel, as in Default Cube and CG Matter. But yeah, thank you for listening to my spiel at the end. I like to keep it at the end so it's not contaminating the beginning of the tutorial. Hopefully that's fine. I hope you enjoyed this free tutorial. Have a nice weekend if you're watching this on the day it came out, which is Friday. So have a nice weekend. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.